Welcome to the See What Sticks Variety podcast featuring your hosts, Jake Andrews, Joe D'Souza, and Jackson Playfair.
Hello, world. This is episode 3 of the See What Sticks podcast. Here with you again, I am Jake Andrews, along with Joe D'Souza and Jackson Playfair. We did this pretty recently, but how you guys doing today?
Excellent.
Doing wonderful. Can't wait to expand on some thoughts and ideas that are floating around in our airways right now.
Yeah, so we definitely went down the rabbit hole, so to speak, last time. We bounced from topic to topic, but it felt really good. So don't totally know what to expect for today's podcast, but I know we're going to dive a bit more into one of our favorite topics, video games. We're going to talk movies and TV, and then we're going to see where it takes us. So on that note, I'm going to prompt you guys just to get right into it here. I have set up a nice little table for you guys to do some ratings for me. So get your thinking caps on.
Ooh,
we have the gaming systems of each generation. So we got Gen 4 to Gen 8, which we can rate. And then we got some anticipated ratings for Gen 9. So a little speculation. We're going to discuss everything from their gaming catalog, like what they have available as far as games, what their starting price was when they came out, how good the controller was, online capabilities, how good the community was, what gimmicks they introduced that kind of stuck in the industry and set the standard. So if you guys are ready, let's hop right into it.
Awesome, let's do it.
Okay, so we got Gen 4 was the first one of kind of importance. We could have went Gen 3 to start, but I feel like that was pretty limited. It was kind of after Atari burned out, and then the only real competitor in the game was the original NES. So that was a clear win for them. Let's skip to Gen 4, which was pretty much a two-horse race. So we had, in the 90s, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System against the Sega Genesis. And I actually saw a documentary, I think it was on Netflix. It's called like The History of Video Games or something. I've watched that thing like 10 times. It's such a nostalgia blast, and it makes me feel good inside. Like I'm a little kid huddled in front of the tube TV with my Mega Man 2 and my Game Genie. But I remember the ads that came out around that time, and it was basically Sega just trying to diss Nintendo and saying Sega can do what Nintendo don't. It was a really cool time to be a gamer, and at the schools, there was always this Nintendo versus Sega kind of who's got what, who do we play with, which team do we support. So first of all, I want to ask both of you, and I'll say myself, what was your guys' console that you had? Did you have one or the other or both?
I had a Sega Genesis, and I got introduced to Sonic the Hedgehog.
And that was because our family had that, right?
Yeah, I got it passed down, and I played. I remember. Okay, there's a couple things actually. A couple memories come to mind. I love the Sega Genesis. I didn't really know. Like, I think actually Justin had the SNES, and there was some cool games on that, like Killer Instinct and like some fighting games and stuff like that. But I had the Sega Genesis, and I played games like Jurassic Park and Sonic. And I remember my sister, Jazz, and Justin, that same kid, they were kind of punks to me. I remember I used to play. I think that's when I really started developing the habit to play video games for very long periods of time. And they would be jumping on the couch beside me, and they would purposely throw pillows at me and stuff, and like laugh and get in my face and that sort of stuff to screw me up and see how upset. And I remember I was like 6 years old, but I absolutely lost my marbles, and I got really mad at them. And as early signs of video game addiction.
I got some of those moments.
Yeah, I actually never had either personally, but we had a Super Nintendo at my grandma's house, which was hilarious because, like, I'm from a small town up in northern BC, and every 4 years our family would gather for a family reunion, and like our family is gigantic now, so it's a lot harder and bigger to do. But back in the day, we used to always go to my grandma's and have dinner, and the kids would go inside, and she had like a dress up trunk that had like tons of outfits and dresses and like all these crazy things the kids could put on. and then a Super Nintendo. So like we'd be huddled around the Super Nintendo, and was like 5 or 6 years old. I'd be wearing a dress from my grandma's dress up trunk, and my brothers would all be dressed up in whatever they were wearing, and we'd be huddled around my cousins who are like, back in the day when you're 6 and your cousin's 12, you think he's like 25, and you're like, dude, they're so much older and better than you at everything, and you're like, how are you doing this? And so we had the original like Super Mario, where it's just like a set, like honestly one of the greatest games of all time because it's so difficult, but it's so simple. And we would literally huddle around. I don't even think I played it more than like a handful of times, but I just remember watching my cousins go through it and like wrap it. And that was the first time I watched a game be like beat and like credits rolled on the screen. And I was like, what is happening right now? Like this game doesn't just go on forever. Dude. And they're like, no, we beat it. Like we beat the game. I'm like, what do you mean you beat the game? Like games end? And they're like, yeah, dude, there's an end story of the game and then it's over. And I just remember having my brain literally blown by that because I was like, dude, I can't even get past level 1, dude. Like I don't even know how to throw green shells backwards yet, and you guys are out here wrapping the game. And dude, that was my first experience with the NS or the Super Nintendo, and I think that's kind of where my passion to play video games and learn and like different storylines and controls and all that stuff was from sitting at my grandma's house watching my cousins kick ass.
Yeah, so I was in the same boat as you guys. I had an SNES personally because that's just the console that me and my brother wanted when we were younger. But Joe had the Sega Genesis, and when I was living in BC, one of my best friends had it. So I didn't feel the need to get both of them, but it was nice to be able to break away from my experience, which was always Nintendo, to go play the Sega with somebody else because they had some good games and there was a uniqueness about it. And I would say when we get into the different parameters and how we're going to rate them, we'll definitely have something to say about each one complimentary. But I loved the catalog for SNES. There's so many games still to this day that hold up well. And I think that's the genius of Nintendo, even to this day, is they don't care too much about the fancy graphics at the time, whether it was polygons with N64 and PS1 or the really new graphics that Xbox and Sony come up with every generation. They're focused on graphics that will stand the test of time, and the Super Nintendo is a very good telling of that because it's, 20-something years old now, and you can still go back and play some games. Some haven't aged as well as others, but there's still games that I go back and play to this day. So without further ado, let's just jump into some ratings here. So as far as and if you feel you don't have enough expertise or experience with one of the systems or the other, or the catalog or whatever, feel free to skip your rating. We'll try and do this diplomatically, but
I can confidently say like 6-year-old Joe, it's a 10 out of 10, baby.
Okay. So if we're going to comment on catalog, we're going to have to put some proof in the pudding here and just kind of run through some of the software titles that might have been big for our audience members, because they're probably sitting at home, and if you mention that obscure game that was like a diamond in the rough, which I have a few for Super Nintendo, they're going to be sitting at home saying, yeah, man, yeah, me too, that was me, I didn't think anyone else knew about that. So the catalog, who do you think, in hindsight, retrospect, without the rose-colored glasses, try to be objective, who do you think had the better catalog of games?
I think it's so hard, but I think I'm gonna, based on nostalgia partly, but also based on the fact, like you kind of touched on, Jake, it stood the test of time, and even now you can still buy like the compact version of the NSES, and I don't know if you can still get Sega Genesis. Like I said, I've only really played Sonic the Hedgehog on it, so I can't comment too much on that, but I gotta go with the Super Nintendo just based on the fact that, like you said, I think you can jump into a brand new game that comes out today and have a blast with it, and then there's also a game you can jump into on the Super Nintendo, and it's just as much fun. So for me, I got to go with that. Although I will say that Sega Genesis releasing the original NHL games was pretty solid to get the ball rolling, but I'll pass that along for now and touch on it later.
For me personally, I think you nailed it because I would always go play the sports games on the Sega because there was something about each version of their sports games. It just seemed better than the SNES. But I feel, and we can just run through some of the games here, that while at the time the graphical comparison definitely favored Sega, I think in hindsight the games definitely were more frequent bestsellers on the SNES. So if you look at the Sega Genesis, some of their best games, and I love some of these, Sonic the Hedgehog 1 through 3. You got the Streets of Rage series for RPG people. You got Phantasy Star. Echo the Dolphin was great. The Shining Force, Shinobi, Castlevania. Some of the best Bomberman games were on there. You had the definitive versions of Lion King and Aladdin, which, it sounds really lame because they were movie tie-ins, but those were actually good games. And the best version of them was on the Genesis. But then if you inverse and you look over at Super Nintendo, it's like a who's who of some of the best games of all time. You got Super Mario World, Super Metroid, Donkey Kong Country, Chrono Trigger, Super Mario RPG, Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island, Earthbound, Kirby, ActRaiser, Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past. You got Street Fighter 2. You got all the Final Fantasies. I could probably go on. Zombies Ate My Neighbors, Turtles in Time, Super Mario All Stars, Mega Man, Mega Man X. It's an insane list. Punch Out.
Oh, what a game!
Yeah, so
What a game!
I feel like hands down, if I was gonna rate it, I would give, in hindsight, Genesis probably around like a 7 because there were some really good games, but not enough of them. And SNES is probably in the 9 to 10 range.
It also really speaks to how Nintendo has survived such a long time. Like, even way back then, their catalog of games was just incredible. And a lot of like major franchises started there. Sega just kind of had there was a couple of them, but Sonic is their big, mainline, their headliner, and he's, except for the movie that just came out, which I mean, I love the movie. I don't know if you've seen the movie. Jim Carrey, it's a dream. But that's kind of the extent of it. Oh, it's totally worth a watch. Like, it's actually surprisingly hilarious and really well done. Like, thank God that they decided to redo the look of him, because that like weird uncanny valley that the first thing. Oh my God.
Yeah, I don't know how that got passed through approval to the point where they were advertising that. Like, he had real human teeth. That was not necessary at any point in time, dude. Like, ever. Anyways.
I'm a little less excited to try and watch this now.
Oh, it's so good. Like, they redid him, and it actually looks like he's actually charming, and it was definitely the wise decision to go. And that also speaks to something maybe we can touch on later, but how the audiences had called for something that they were so upset about, and it actually made the production company go back into the movie and spend God knows how much more time, effort, and money to redo it properly. And then look how it actually paid off. It actually became a very, very successful movie too. So it wasn't just Jim Carrey carrying it.
Cool. Carrey carrying it?
Carrey carrying
carry any.
I think there's been probably another topic we can dive down later, because there has been some disastrous video game movie tie-ins, but there's also recently been some pretty good ones. I know it's more of a book, but Ready Player One was amazing. You got the Wreck-It Ralph movies, and then most recently the Pokemon Detective Pikachu really surprised me. And we had a video game movie come out recently. It wasn't Sonic. What was the other one? Can you guys think of it?
It was Pokemon.
Well, The Witcher.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking of, but that's definitely a good one. If it comes to my mind, I'll mention it later. So just to get back on track, so I think we're pretty in agreement on the catalog. I think SNES takes it, if not significantly. Which controller did you guys prefer? Because I know the Genesis one was a bit too big for my hands, but I liked how it had the 3 buttons instead of the 4, and they were all in a row, weren't they? Or was there 4 buttons? I thought there was 3 on the Genesis.
I think
Face
there was
buttons?
3 too. I'll look it up, but I think there were 3. Actually, I have it pulled up here.
Yeah, I think that you're right, because I remember being a kid and going over to my buddy's house that had the SNES and being blown away by the extra buttons. Wasn't there extra
Yeah.
buttons on the top too?
There was
Yeah,
only
they were the first
3.
one to do the L and R button.
Yeah, that was a game changer. But I gotta go SNES because even just looking at it, dude, like I don't know. I think the Sega Genesis looks like a boomerang, dude. It's a very strange controller.
Yeah. So SNES has definitely contributed to the long-term change of controllers in the industry. So I think that's a clear winner as well. Online capabilities is inapplicable, but I'm pretty sure there was a first instance of a multi-tap on the Super Nintendo, right? So it was basically a device that you could plug into the Super Nintendo that would extend the range of players from 2 to 4.
Oh yeah. So you can play with more people.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So that's another kind of game changer. I feel like a lot of these implementations at the time were very novel and gimmicky, but then when you look back in hindsight, it definitely contributed to the overall evolution of controllers in general. So,
Oh yeah, it's the building blocks.
Mm-hmm.
Community support, I feel like is a toss up, and it's almost in Sega's favor because in order to take on the 1,000-pound elephant in the room, which was Nintendo at the time, you needed to have some extremely hardcore fans, and that's the type of person that Sonic appeals to. Is that angst and energy and fervent support. So I don't know if you guys would agree with that.
It was the music in Sonic that had me, like the Green Hills, that opening song. Oh man, I love that. Like I listen to it today, I still like it so much.
But did either of you go to school and in the debates you would sit there and defend Sega, like with some gusto?
No, it was because I was.
Yeah,
It was well. I was just real quick. It was more PlayStation 2, Xbox. Those when the debates happened.
Yeah, mine was. I think N64 was kind of the first, which I'm sure we'll jump into in the next. But yeah, I was a little bit too young to be debating them in school.
So I guess I'm the go-to for this generation, which was like my first one when I was coming up in public school or in elementary school. Sorry, but there was some definite schoolyard debates. I feel like the Sega crowd was a little louder because they felt they had to be, but the community support was pretty even. I'm gonna give it a Genesis just to be nice because they kind of had to defend their point more. Gimmicks. So I think we talked about the multi-tap, the shoulder buttons. I know Sega had the 32-bit graphic system, and SNES had the 16-bit. So that was kind of novel. That kind of pushed the boundary of what was possible at the time. I still lean in towards SNES for the long-term contributions. I can't think of any other gimmicks that. Oh, you know what? There was wasn't Virtual Boy and the Duck Hunt gun was NES, but there was a lot of peripherals for the Super Nintendo. I don't know that there was that much for the Sega. There was the add-on that you could play Master System.
Well, the only add-on that I remember for Sega Genesis was Knuckles. How cool it was that you could get this like half a cartridge, and you could plug in Sonic 2 or 3 on top of it and like make a super game, and they fused the games together in some way, and then that way you could play Knuckles in the older, like that just blew my mind. Like even to this day, it actually impresses me a lot that they had that sort of functionality where you could like get this periphery half a game and just like add it on to the original games and make like a whole new super game. It introduced all these extra like levels and all this extra uh like things you could do, like hypersonic was something that wasn't in the older games that they introduced, like a whole new storyline. It was pretty crazy. It was pretty like out there to do that back then. And
yeah, that sounds super advanced.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's probably just me that's thinking this way, but when I think of, okay, there's a cartridge that goes on top of another cartridge to allow you access to extra content, that seems to be the first identifiable instance, at least in my head, of like downloadable content, even though it was
Yeah.
not that in a sense, but it was, I don't remember SNES doing anything but sequels. There wasn't like something you could place onto an existing game and get more juice out of it. So that is a contribution if you think about it in that sense. I'm going to give it a tie because I feel like Sega definitely made some leaps and bounds. Not sure it's head and shoulders above anything SNES did, but it looks like we have SNES with 3-1. Looks to be the winner of Gen 4. I don't think many people in the audience would probably debate that, but if you have something to say, something we overlooked or missed about Gen 4, feel free to leave it in the comments or shoot us a message, and we'll probably debate it on another show if somebody makes a good point. Gen 5 is probably the first one you guys are going to be highly engaged in because it was more of your coming of age. So we got N64 versus PS1, and just for the hell of it, because it existed at the time, but I don't think anyone has any delusions that it's going to place very high, as the Sega Saturn. So when we talk about catalog of games, I want to get your guys' just general feel before I start rattling off some names here. But what do you guys think about the catalog comparison for this gen?
All right. Well, if I can take this before we get too deep in anything, I will say I have an extreme bias because N64 was my childhood Christmas morning moment. And I think we all probably have that. But there's actually a hilarious video on YouTube. And I think if you just search up N64 kid on YouTube, you'll probably find it, where the kid like gets his N64 on Christmas, rips it open, and is like screaming N64 at the camera. And essentially, that's exactly what happened with me and my two brothers Christmas morning in St. John, New Brunswick, running downstairs and ripping apart our N64 and being like, I don't even remember anything after that, dude. All it was N64 for months, dude. It's literally a blur. So I've been looking through the catalog of games specifically to that, and I'm just going to rattle off a few of my quick favorites before, because I think they're just legendary games that when nostalgia comes to mind, it just blows my mind with some of these games. So the first one is arguably one of the greatest games of all time, I would say, to a huge generation, but GoldenEye 007. Yep. What a game. That game can still be played today. Again,
yeah.
It is just so good. It's just so simple but well done. And anyways, next one, Madden Football 64. That was kind of my first introduction to a football game, and like sports games on a broader scale than just specifically hockey games. This game, when I seen the cover picture of it, it legitimately brought me back to sitting in my basement playing split screen with my brother, but 1080 degree snowboarding, and it was phenomenal. Just phenomenal. This game, I oh my goodness. Anyways, All-Star Baseball, and to finish it up, a game that was very, very underappreciated for its time, I feel. Base Masters 2000 fishing game. What a game. What a game. Just they captured the feeling of reeling in a nice bass on your rod in the year 2000. It was wonderful. So for me, those are my favorites.
I said this conversation has already vindicated itself for like purpose, because when I'm listing off games, my experience is totally different than your experience, but it's all good memories, nostalgia, and it builds the case for how good of a console that really was. Now, I know I have a lot to say about it, but I'm going to throw it over to Joe first, because I know he's batting hard on Team PS1, and there is really not a wrong answer to which is the best one of this generation. We're just going to try and make the best case we can for the one we feel passionate about. So, Joe, throw us a couple games, moments from PS1 that you think helped define the era.
Oh, dude. There was so many good games that there was so many good memories from the PlayStation 1. I remember, because you Jake, had the N64. Like, you had both of them. So I remember coming over and playing the N64 with you guys. And just real quick about the controller, just kind of what I was saying before with how Nintendo was like, oh my God, there's more buttons. With this, I remember seeing the N64 controller for the first time and being like, I don't even know where to place my hand. Like, what am I supposed to do here? That was a little overwhelming as a
That's
9
very
10.
true, though.
Yeah, but the PlayStation One, like the games, oh my God! Like I remember Soul Reaver, which was like a sequel. It's like where you play this vampire that becomes like dies or like gets betrayed by the other vampires and then gets reborn as like a reaper of souls. I just remember that like 3D game was incredible. I loved like Tony Hawk, Crash Bandicoot 1, 2, and 3, Spyro. Loved those games. And also like I was introduced to role playing games with Final Fantasy 7 and 8. I remember getting both of those for Christmas because I remember you and Mike, Jake, you guys were like, we're getting into it. And I remember watching you guys play. I remember that was another fun thing that I remember growing up too, is like coming over to you guys' house and watching you guys play some of these video games. And I remember Final Fantasy 8 was the first one that I got into. I didn't really play much between 7, 8, and 9. And then I skipped right to like 15. But I loved those games. Like I just dove so many hours, and I remember like I would pretend like I was sick so I could stay home and play video games. So many good ones. Like there'll be more that pop into mind, but those are the ones that like immediately pop into my head.
I remember kind of similar to Jackson's view of how the N64 got introduced to me, because I was pretty young still at the time when the N64 came out. And I remember still playing the SNES, and they had a thing which kind of contributes to Sony's legacy as well, because as far back as I feel like it was the late 90s, they had what was called the Sega Channel, and our neighbor, like our babysitter downstairs, had a subscription to the Sega Channel, and you can go on, and it was like the first Netflix for games. It was unreal. Some people don't even remember that was a thing. But I was still content playing SNES and the Sega Channel, and then all of a sudden, my brother comes home with the N64, or I think that it was given to us on Christmas, like Jackson said. I don't even really remember. I just remember popping in the first game, which was Super Mario 64, and just it obliterated the opinion I had of video games. It just stretched it so much further than what I thought was possible. And I remember having my mind blown just walking around in that first level right outside the Mushroom Kingdom Peach's Castle thing. And that was a game changer. But so Joe is fond memories PS1. He's a good advocate for that. Jackson's on the other side of the coin. I'm a bit of both. So I had the PS1, I think, before the N64. I don't know which one I have better memories with. I'm gonna probably say N64, but I just want to make a case for both of them as far as the catalog is concerned. So I feel like the catalogs for both systems are very comparable. It's kind of hard to pick a clear cut winner here, because when you look through the catalog of games, there's some of my favorite ones of all time on both systems, and it's really hard to make the call here. So for N64, just off the top of my head, we got Super Mario 64, GoldenEye, like Jackson mentioned, Ocarina of Time, Mario Kart 64. You got Banjo Kazooie, Majora's Mask, Donkey Kong 64, Pokemon Snap, Paper Mario. The list goes on. PS1, on the other hand, you got the whole Final Fantasy series, Metal Gear Solid, Symphony of the Night, the Tekken games, Parappa the Rapper, which was very interesting. Resident Evil, the definitive editions were all on there. The best Tony Hawk versions were on there. Xenogears, Soul Reaver, as Joe mentioned, Final Fantasy Tactics. That's a pretty meaty list too. So I think for me personally, I can't call a winner. I don't even know which one I had better memories with. Probably the N64, but that's my preference back to the nostalgic, cartoony kind of feel of it. What do you guys think? You comfortable giving the catalogs a tie, or are you leaning one way or another?
I'm good with a tie.
Yeah. No, I think they both achieved what they were looking for in their own realms of kind of moving the bar forward, you know?
And I think we're in agreement that Sega Saturn is not in the same realm. The only games I can even think of that kind of still matter are Shining Force, Panzer Dragoon, which just got a remake, And then they had Dragon Force, which is actually one of my favorite games of all time. If you've never heard of it, check it out. I wish they'd do a remake. But yeah, let's call it a tie between Sony and Nintendo on that one. Controller is a really interesting one because you had PS1 had they didn't have DualShocks on that. That was PS2. So the first instance of a joystick in gaming is actually N64. And at the time, people thought it was a super gimmick. It was in a weird location. If you were playing Mario Party, it kind of made your hand bleed. But it was revolutionary for sure. So what do you guys think on controller?
I think that as much as I do love the N64, that controller was something, dude. Like I don't understand truly why it was 3-pronged. Like why did you need anyway? So just because I'm going to try and not go fully biased here, I would love a deeper explanation, and maybe I'll do some research and figure out what their thinking was behind it. But I got to go with the PS4 because I think, or the PS1, sorry, because I don't think that controller's even changed too much when you look at the PS1 versus even what they're coming out with now. So for me, controller, probably PS1.
Yeah, I'm going to say for creative oomph, I'll give it to the N64, but in terms of just like making sense, the PlayStation 1 totally takes the cake for me. And what was interesting was like back then, I never really used that right joystick ever. Like it was there for some games, like maybe for Spyro or something, but it wasn't until like I didn't play any first-person shooters on the PlayStation 1 that I can recall really.
But correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. I thought the PS2 was the first instance of the joysticks on a PlayStation controller. I'm pretty sure the PS1 just had the track or the directional pad, right?
No, it
Am I
had
wrong?
joysticks. I'm pretty sure it had joysticks. Yeah.
I'll have to fact check for sure, but I'm gonna look it up right now. No, it didn't. If you look at a
What?
picture of it, I was right. Yeah, so the PS2 is the first one. So that's what I mean. The N64 had significant contribution to the way controllers were thought about, and they ended up implementing it in PS2.
What?
So I think as far as the controller goes, I have to give it to the N64 for innovation and what they contributed long term. But as far as what felt better in my hand and what responded better and didn't confuse me like the N64 one, because those arrow buttons, yeah, the joystick was in a weird position. It definitely offered you a lot more control for the time, but it didn't really feel that great in my hand, and it still doesn't. So I think I'd have to give the edge, despite the legacy contribution to the PS1 as well. So I think we're in agreement.
Dude, well, real quick, I must have had a later version of the PlayStation because I do remember having the joy, and I got a picture here that shows the PlayStation with the joysticks at the bottom, both of them.
Yeah, so it does say that Sony introduced the world's first dual stick controller for its games console PlayStation in 1997. So it must have been the original didn't have it, and then maybe they saw that N64 had something and they wanted to go in the same direction. But
whoa, it made me think there's a phenomenon, right? What's that phenomenon where like I briefly had it for a moment, but I was like, no, I was actually thinking properly. But it did make me think of something that I'd kind of like to talk about, perhaps as the podcast goes on here. But where like you remember things a certain way, but it turns out that it was not even close to what you thought it was. There's a phenomenon that I just want to like plant. No, I'm gonna plant the seed here for a second, and we'll talk about it once we wrap this up. But I'm gonna look it up as we wrap this segment up.
So the controller, actually, I got to go back to the other side because I just forgot of an oft overlooked feature that's now standard in every controller, which the N64 introduced. Also, was the rumble pack. That's the first instance of the shaking of the controller that is synonymous with every controller now. So I think I'm going to have to go with N64 on this one, despite how uncomfortable it was at times. So the tiebreaker's up to you, Joseph.
Dude, Rumble Pack was the strangest flex that ever came out. Like, if you went over to your buddy's house and he had a Rumble Pack, you're like, oh
What is
shit,
this sorcery?
dude got a Rumble Pack. Oh
They
shit.
had the expansion pack that was also along the same lines. You had more store space for saves.
Yeah, dude, which is hilarious when you look back at those things and realize how little amount of storage space they had, and they sell like 1 gigabyte like storage or memory cards. So funny, man.
So this is all opinion based, and there's no wrong answer here. Jack's leaning PS1. I totally was going that way until I remembered how many damn innovations the N64 controller had. So Joe, you're the tiebreaker. What are you thinking?
PlayStation 1.
So PS1's taking the controller aspect of it. Online capabilities, I don't think there really was any for either system.
No, I don't remember it for sure.
So if you look at multiplayer couch co-op enabling, I think N64 has to take it hands down. So that's the trickle down. If there's no online for either one of them, which had the better multiplayer support? Which one did you play local co-op on more? I think the answer hands down would have to be N64 for GoldenEye and Mario Kart and Mario Party.
Yeah. PlayStation felt like a very single player type experience for me.
And it still is for me, which is why I love my PS4 is there's no single player experience like it, hands down. But we'll talk about that when Gen 8 rolls around. Community support. So who was more passionate? I think N64 had that contingent of Nintendo loyals that supported it no matter what people were saying about it at the time. It was underpowered, it was gimmicky. But I feel like with the first instance of the PlayStation and it being the first competitor that actually had a chance against Nintendo, I feel like the grassroots support for that thing was unheard of. And that's why we got such popularity with PS2, which I think is one of the best selling consoles of all time. So I'm going to probably lean in the PS1 direction.
Fair arguments.
Yeah. Any rebuttals? Any comments?
No, I got nothing there. I'd have to agree just because based on obviously it kind of being the starter of what PlayStation would become. I think I mean, Nintendo will forever have and continue to have the people that bring back those nostalgic memories. I think we all have, but I think the explosion of PS1 to PS2 kind of shows that like once people got into it, they truly like it stole their hearts and they loved it for what they loved it for, right? And that was the start with PS1.
Well, and for the audience too. So I made up a lot of these parameters on the fly, so I don't think I defined them well enough for the people answering the question. So if we're looking at community support, I guess the main thing I look at is who is more vocal about. If there was a debate on the schoolyard about PS1 versus N64, who was making the most noise? I think the PS1 crowd was a little more vocal.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. And as far as gimmicks go, I think between everything they introduced and just having the ability in the back of the N64 controller, a port that you could plug things into, kind of left a lot of space for them to experiment. So I think, again, N64 would probably have to win that one.
I mean, not in the same design moving forward, but I think it definitely set the tone for downloadable content and different add-ons that we began to see kind of take fold in the next generations and generations to come after that.
So we're almost done crowning a winner for Gen 5. I want to just introduce a little bit of I don't want to say devil's advocate, but let's discuss the weird part about this, because I'm looking back at this generation, and when we discussed online capabilities, I only thought of the first two, but I think the Sega Saturn actually did have online capabilities. So if we're thinking of the only one that really did, you'd have to give that to Saturn, which would mean N64 doesn't get the vote, which means PS1 would win this generation. Do we want to overlook the Saturn in every aspect and just keep the multiplayer co-op support N64 gets the vote?
Dude, I didn't even know the Sega Saturn existed. I just knew there was a PlayStation 1. And then I heard
we're disqualifying it by default then, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the results mean that we got a tie for this generation. So We're not giving it to anybody. Both amazing systems, both amazing catalogs, both good controllers, both good support in their own way, multiplayer versus single player. I'm comfortable giving this generation a tie. And I think the boys are too. So we're going to pick up with Gen 6 and 7 on a future episode, and then we'll wrap up with 8 and speculation for the next gen, which we're going to have a lot to say about on a further episode after that. I want to give the floor open to the boys here. Do you guys have a particular direction you're hoping to go with the next conversation, or should I further it with another bone tossed?
Well, I mean, I kind of want to. I was thinking about going kind of just like a stream of consciousness for a little bit here because I was thinking, yeah, like I was just thinking about kind of what I was touching on a little bit before with this false memory phenomenon, and so this is something called the Mandela Effect.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yes.
So explain.
So
go deep, Joe. Go deep.
Let's do this.
Go deep.
Okay, so the Mandela Effect is commonly used nickname for false memory. It's a psychological phenomenon where you recall things as you think they happened rather than how they actually did. And so this is like a lot of people experience this, especially in a current generation. For example, with how we remember things like Fruit Loops, like the loops in Fruit Loops. Okay, so is it spelled FRUITLOOPS, like Fruit Loops, or is it FROOTLOOPS?
What? It's definitely not the second one.
It's the second one.
No, it's not.
It's got 2 O's in it. It's not spelled
Ew.
regularly.
I did not know that. And another one, actually, Bernstein Bears. I now that you brought this up, I actually remember researching this because there's a whole conspiracy theory that believes that it was like in 2012 is when we shifted into like a different dimension, and these are all the things that were like left over from the other reality that we.
What?
Yeah, dude, this shit goes deep. I remember looking this up because it was. Oh man, here let me pull it up because there's actually, if you look up Bernstein Bears, there's like a similar one of how, yeah, like Bernstein Bears is BERENSTAIN, which again, you got to look it up. But I've always remembered being spelled differently. And there's like a bunch of different things. Literally, if you search Bernstein Bears, let me read this to you. Is it Berenstein, BERENSTEIN, or STAIN? And it goes, the theory goes like this. The popular series of illustrated children's books is officially called the Berenstain Bears, named after their creators. But that can't be right because we all remember them being called the Berenstein Bears, which means not that we are all wrong, but their spelling changed at some point. So, dude.
What?
Yeah, man, this is a legit thing where people are like, it's deeper than like thinking. Because what you were saying earlier with the Mandela, where you think something happened one way, like, dude, that's the story of my life when I get in arguments with people, and it's like, no, you're wrong, I'm right. But yeah, dude, there's a whole list of these things that it's a trip, man, and it makes you think about reality in like this weird way.
Well, man, there's a couple more here that are a little bit more than just like spellings too, like mirror, mirror on the wall. Actually, not the line. It's magic mirror on the wall. What? No. Luke, I am your father.
That's the one.
Yeah, he doesn't even say Luke. He just says, I am your father.
That Berenstein Bears thing is absolutely true because I could have sworn it was Berenstein. And then later on in life, somebody challenged me on it. And I went up and looked, and it's, Berenstain. But nobody said Berenstain.
That's what I mean, man. And, like, it looks... it's a trip, dude. Like, some of the things... And, again, does that just teach it... Like, it's like the... You ever see that where you read a sentence, and it's like, what is the error in this sentence? And you look back, and there's, like, 2 thes, and your brain doesn't recognize it? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Is this like an effect of that, or is it like, because dude, even like Oscar, I guess that one a little bit. Oscar Mayer, like the hot dog company, MEYER or MAYER. Like, I don't know. I think people need to dive into this. Skechers, dude. Skechers doesn't have a T in it.
Yeah, what?
Like, pardon?
I've seen the sign.
Right? So this is what we need people to do a little bit of okay, come on. No. Dude, the Monopoly guy. Does he have a monocle? The guy on
No.
No, he doesn't, dude. Isn't that I would have bet I'm looking at two different pictures and that's a trip, man. There's definitely things out there that don't make sense, and I don't know if we've just all accepted them to be the way they are, but at the same time, I don't like this.
Sinbad never played a genie?
Dude, yes he did, didn't he? Dude, I feel like we could just do this nonstop. We could just look at different things and be like, wait, no. But we need more. We need more evidence and proof from people. Because like is this what happens when you grow old? Is this part of getting older? Is this just life? Is this what happens when you get older? You look back and realize that everything was not the way you thought it was?
That's such a trip to think about. Like the whole thing of like reading something and seeing two thes in it. It makes me think kind of like when I was in like grade 6 or 7 and reading a math question, like those problems, and I'm like they were so confusing and difficult to read. I could barely understand, and none of them make sense. And just like difficulty reading something, your brain just skips over it. I felt like that's what I was doing when I was reading those math problems. I was just like, my brain's skipping over all of this. I don't even know where to start.
100%. Okay, if we can move on after this, unless we want to keep going down this rabbit hole specifically, but how about this one? Okay, we are the champions. Freddie Mercury, Queen singing that song. How does that song end? We are the champions. What?
Of the world.
Of the world.
Dude, never happened.
What?
Freddie Mercury never says at the end of that song, we are the champions of the world.
What?
Dude, what?
What does he say?
He just ends it, we are the champions.
What?
No.
Dude, I'm pulling up the lyrics right now, but I swear that's what I just seen on this website.
They're fucking with you, bro.
I don't know, man. I'm looking up the lyrics right now.
I like this. Psychological effects. What are some other...
Dude, look at it. Okay. Oh, it's because he says it the second last verse. He goes, we are the champions of the world, but then finishes with no, just because we are the champions. So it is in the song. It's just not at the end of the song.
Oh, that's kind of a cheeky.
Yeah, that's I don't like that. I don't like this website anymore. Good Housekeeping, you're bullshit. Your website is complete garbage. He lied to me. Anyways, moving on.
Okay, it's like, what are some other crazy psychological effects?
Oh, okay. So I took psychology, 2 different classes, Psych 1001 and Psych 1002 in university. And there were some cool effects that they were talking about. One of the ones, just to stimulate the conversation, is the bystander effect. So if you witnessed an emergency happening right before your eyes, you would certainly take some action to help the person in trouble, right? While we might all like to believe that this is true, psychologists suggest that whether or not you intervene might depend upon the number of other witnesses present. The term bystander effect refers to the phenomenon in which the greater the number of people present, the less likely people are to help a person in distress. Somebody else will do it.
Yeah, that's bad. I remember in one of our philosophy class, a few of them actually, we were talking about this, like how the self perception is enough to make it's crowd mentality. So in existentialism, there's this idea that there's I'm going to butcher this a little bit because it's still it's in German, or not German, or whatever it was in the original written. I'm pretty sure it's German, but there's the idea of like crowd or group mentality versus individual group or individual mentality or identity. So it's kind of something like I here we go with Peterson a bit, but the idea that you want to focus on your individual, and the whole thing about existentialism and what Nietzsche talks about is create, not just Nietzsche, but other ones like Kierkegaard and some other philosophers of existentialism. It's all focused on improving the individual as like much and as greatly as possible, and really avoiding crowd mentality, because then you lose yourself in the crowd. And it actually, to go back to like World War II, and that is part of the reason why there was an experiment that I'm sure you guys have heard of, where people were like getting like brought in and being told to like press on an electrical signal, and there's an actor on the other side of it, and the scientist that was doing the research kept telling the person that was volunteering to keep increasing the voltage to points far beyond fatal, and people still would, just because that they wouldn't. They were in this sort of like group mentality, in the sense that they weren't making individual decisions; they were just being told what to do, and therefore responsibility was taken off of them. And that's a very bad idea. That's a very scary consequence, and it leads to what you're saying, Jake.
Yeah, dude. I think that ultimately that's again something that shows this weird part of human nature, right? It's like credibility and accountability for your own decisions and actions. I think people naturally act better when they know that there's a consequence to their own actions. And I mean, you can look at it right down to like, the way that people are raised, and the different households and different ways that they're shaped into the person they become is like, if you know there's consequences for your actions, you're likely to not act that way, or you at least take that into consideration, where when consequences aren't a thing, or the option to be able to blame someone else and have that blame pushed aside, it says a lot about human nature. I think it's like, I think individual accountability in our generation, in this era, is like rising, and people are realizing, you can have an impact. I think that for a long time was like, I'm one of whatever 100 million or however many million people in a country or in a town or in a whatever. What do I do? What does it matter for me? And I think that like you said, it's such a weird aspect, because I always compare it back to like war. If we were to go back to war in a day and age like today, and I know that the war in Afghanistan and Iraq is recent, and there's people whose jobs are military based and all that, but I do think that if we ever got to a point where a country called upon its people that has developed at this age and said, listen, everybody, if you get drafted, if you get this, if you're of age, if you're able bodied, you're going to fight the war, and we need however many million people past the people that are already in the military. I don't know. I don't see that going as smoothly or as it did in the past, because I think people are willing to take the individual accountability of being like, no, I don't want to do that. I think that's wrong, and I think that things need to change. And I think that's part of the growth we're seeing with our society today, whether it be like climate change in the world, or just change in general. I think people are beginning to realize, like, yeah, my voice is quiet, but at the same time, it's my voice, and I'm going to speak it how I want to speak it. But then, like you said, it comes back to the psychological aspect of it, where we're naturally trained to do what the group does. We're trained to not be outsiders, or not be the one standing up or making a difference. But then when we do have the one, I think oftentimes we look back and realize those are the people that kind of make history,
Yeah, I like it, and we were talking about. I can't remember if it was the last podcast or the first one. Where I was mentioning, I think it was the last one, where we were mentioning how when Loki in the first Avengers, and he's making that speech, and I was talking about the speech before, and how he's saying everybody wants to be ruled over, right? We want to be slaves, on quote unquote. Whereas there's that one gentleman that stands up and says, "Not to people like you," and that's an example of that one person thinking not in crowd mentality and standing up for a greater maybe morality or a greater belief in something. And yeah, like existentialism as a philosophy is really recent. Like it's just after World War II, 1945-ish, forward, and for like maybe like 5-10 years when they were having their conversations. Basically, they were doing like original podcasts in a coffee house where they would just get together and talk about stuff that interests them. So it's recent, but I mean, individualism extends way. Those are ancient thoughts too.
Yeah, and I think that like it's a weird thing to look at society and people as we are today, because then I think the conversation or argument could be brought up of like, if you don't have that pack mentality of the majority and everyone is standing up and trying to say their own, I think it diminishes the value that comes when someone does stand up to an authority that people might think is wrong or not realize is wrong until someone stands up, you know? Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is one kind of feeds the other without the idea that there's a bunch of people that will do what they're told until someone stands up and shows them they're wrong. Like, that person can't stand up and show them what they believe is right or wrong and then get people to join them unless we have the crowd mentality, right? So it's this weird
Feedback.
feeding
Yeah.
exactly, that just it kind of loops back and forth with itself.
Yeah, it's definitely a catch-22. I feel like when we're talking about group mentality, there's a lot of interesting psychological aspects that like play into sociological situations and like the basic human reaction to things. So I was looking up interesting like paradoxes and psychological effects that most people would identify but don't know the name of. So there's one thing called the Abilene paradox. And it's described as a circumstance where a group of individuals agrees to a course of action based on the theory that it is best for the group, despite going against the preferences of individual members of that group. This occurs when individuals feel their objections are not strong enough to support changing the mind of others in the group, and it's commonly referred to as rocking the boat. So there's a lot of situations, like say in high school or in elementary school, there's some outcast, or that's how people view them anyways, comes into a group of friends as like the new kid, and you say, hey, he's pretty cool, I wouldn't mind being friends with him. But I mean, the bully mentality takes over. The overall group thinks he's the new kid, let's give him a hard time, and he doesn't belong in our group. And no individual person, despite probably most of that group thinking, what the hell is the problem, like, let's just be nice to this kid. The loudest people in the group tend to have the biggest voices, and then they're afraid to challenge that authority, and they just end up going with the crowd despite thinking this is very wrong. And
We're animals, dude. Like,
Exactly.
it's
And
crazy.
I think people forget that a lot. You know what I mean? Like, even in my own daily life, I have these conversations sometimes, and people view that as like an out there thought. You know, they're like, "Well, no, we're so civilized," and it's like, "No, dude. Like, we just figured out that like, okay, homes are nice. This is nice. That's nice. This helps us." But at the end of the day, like, that animal human instinct is ultimately what drives the majority of the decisions that we all make, and the way we live our lives. And that is like an out there thought in itself. And I think that it's weird because the internet and technology and advancements have made us push further away from that truth that we are kind of animalistic in 100% sense. And people forget that is where a lot of our traits and stuff come from. And I think living through this time, we're seeing the biggest change or push away from that. You know, like, people don't want to accept that, so we're just going to keep advancing technology further. We're going to keep accepting different social stigmas or social acceptances and all these different things, which I totally agree with. I think the world should be a more accepting place, a more caring place, a more loving place. But it also is, it takes time, and it's taken a long time for us to get to where we're at and continue to move forward, because I think naturally as humans, like you said, like, you want to push away. You want to look at the different and say, well, we're on the good side of that, and that's the bad side. And I think as we all move along further and further, and year by year, we see that like acceptance is a lot quicker of a way to get to what quote unquote peace or happiness than judgment and saying, no, that's wrong or this is wrong, because ultimately we are animals and no one really knows what's right or what's wrong. But happy and acceptance feels better than fear and denial, you know?
yeah, and I think that, you know, it comes back to that hero mentality you're talking about. And most people, I guess, would think a simplistic view of being a hero is to speak out when something needs to be spoken on that goes against that pack mentality. And I hate to bring it back to bullying, but even in my own life, you know, a lot of people say the worst thing you can have in life is regret. Some of the best moments I have from school and my childhood weren't the times that I went along with the pack and I contributed to like this bullying behavior. Those are some of the things I'm most ashamed about. Some of the things I'm most proud about is when I used my position as somebody who was respected socially to go out on a limb and go against that pack mentality and try to influence it in a more positive way. And I wish I would have done that more in hindsight. But that's the type of lesson I take into adulthood. And is if I have an opportunity to speak up and I know something is wrong, I'm not as afraid to do so to threaten my own social standing or existence. I don't care as much about those things. I care more about doing what is right.
That's really interesting, man. I got a couple things to say about that. First, it's like as we get older, it's interesting because I've heard stories of like as you get older, you like kind of stop caring about bullshit or stop caring what people think of you, and you kind of like settle into yourself a little bit more confidently, all your flaws and all the things you do really well. But that was just a quick thought. But the other one that I found really, really interesting in regards to how you remember certain instances in the past. I feel like we're more likely to remember those moments where we stood against the grain and didn't follow the group mentality, because literally I'm trying to think back of, unless I was like really like self-critical about something that I followed a group, like people bullying somebody else, unless I followed somebody and like thought that was a bad idea. I bet you there's a bunch of times where like something was going down and I don't remember it at all, because it's like maybe that like critical self analysis leads to a certain stronger memory of ideas, because I can imagine there's tons of times where when you're in that group mentality mode, it's just like you're almost like on autopilot, like you're not even thinking, you know what I mean? It's just a kind of an interesting thought about, you don't remember the parts when you're part of the group.
I think it comes down to I think a critical analysis of your own understanding of situations as they unfold around you. It would take a very mature, strong person at a young age to understand those social nuances. And I feel like I did that and I was in a position to have more of a voice. I was just scared to do so because popularity is so fickle when you're younger that I probably should have taken more of a stand on certain issues, but you can't change the past. You can only be more effective going forward. So
it's funny.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say real quick, but like it makes me think of Joe Rogan, one of Joe Rogan's stand-ups, where he's talking about like how kids that are like 4 or 5, they're people, and they like gather and they're like, okay, play dumb, and you know what I mean? It's funny because like I think all of us are kind of like that to some extent.
I think it's funny as an adult when you observe children of that age going through social situations, and you're like, it's like a zoo exhibit, and you're on the outside. You don't want to interfere too much because you want to let it run its course, depending on how severe the situation gets. But it is funny how kids navigate social situations versus adults.
Oh, it's crazy, but it's also like we talked about being feeling personally like I've been on both sides of that, where I've definitely as a kid made someone feel bad about something or went after something and wasn't, now looking back, proud of that or happy about that, and then getting older and realizing that was wrong, and then helping or stepping in moments and feeling better and being there for somebody. I think such a large portion of it comes back to kids not understanding their emotions at that age, right? Like understanding their feelings. I know I look back on my childhood in certain areas growing up, and I was very like insecure of myself, and I didn't know if I was cool or not cool, and I just wanted people to like me, and I wanted to be like, I wanted to have friends. I wanted to be the popular kid, and sometimes in your mind as a kid, if that means putting someone else down to stand up, I think it's not right, but it also just shows us that like kids are at such a young age where they're learning and they're developing, and they're going through all these emotions, and when it's not discussed or it's not brought up and made aware, I think it's hard to wrap your mind around that. And I actually, going into a little bit of a personal story, but I had that first moment for me, the first time that I experienced doing psychedelic mushrooms, and it was the first time in my life that I had a thought where I was like, wait a second, I get sad and I get happy and I get anxious and I get nervous. But so does Joe. Joe gets sad and Joe gets happy and Joe gets anxious and Joe gets nervous. And so does Jake and so does my brother and so does my mom and dad. And every single person that you've ever met has these feelings. Are they different? Do they come from different ways or different avenues? Absolutely. And some people have, you know, the issues that other people would look at and say, "Oh my God, how can you be sad about that? Look at the rest of your life, or look at how lucky you are. Look at where you were born. Look at where your family, or look at this, or look at that." And there's always going to be levels of that. But for me, the first realization that I had, where I was like, "Oh, those people get sad too. Those people have the same emotion that you have," was when I felt like I was kind of opening up to that experience, and it really blew my mind. And I was, I was 22 years old, and I had a moment looking back recently where I was like, it took me 22 years to open up to enough perspective to realize that people have similar feelings and emotions, and they're going through their own issues every single day. And like, I think that for moving forward with kids that we see now at a young age, and personally with my own son, like, all I want him to know is that people do feel that they might be different. They might, look different, sound different, act different, come from a different place, and not understand any of your issues or your problems on a micro level, but on a macro scale of how they feel. Everybody has those feelings, and that to me is truly a perspective morphing, changing moment to have that realization. And I think that we need to help kids understand that at a younger age.
I feel like I totally agree with your points, and I hate to loop it all back to bullying, but I feel that there's such a social pressure on kids, and it's a very interesting topic to discuss about what are the causes of bullying, what perpetuates it, what allows us to keep permeating this kind of atmosphere where kids go in terrified. And I think there's a couple aspects to it. I think one is the social ostracization factor, and I think the other one is the threat of physical intimidation. So if people are being bullied in a group mentality, and those loudest people that are often viewed as the most popular or the strongest, why would I, as somebody who is in good social standing, want to ruin that by speaking up for somebody who's not, and turn the wrath of whoever is at the top of the social standing towards my direction? It takes a very
Fear
strong
aversion. Yeah.
person at that age to find that kind of courage. And I think that that's why it perpetuates. And in this age of, if I stand up for this person and I get socially ostracized and physically intimidated, that physical intimidation can run its course into like a school shooting, or after school, a group of bullies will track you down and do untold amount of harm to you. And no wonder people don't want to speak out. I think us as adults in society trying to raise kids in a way that is better than what we grew up with, or can help navigate those situations better. I can't expect my kid to have more courage than me when I understand what it was like to be that age and how difficult it is to speak up. I think us as adults in society need to really promote the fact that it is like basic common decency to your neighbor to stand up in groups to bullying, and stand up to groups of people who are looking to socially deprive and intimidate physically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that ultimately, as you become an adult and we move forward, that's the responsibility that needs to be taken. And I think that the big thing to try and understand, which for me is, again, was hard to understand, but oftentimes the one who's bullying or doing that or pushing and doing and seeing different ways of attacking somebody else is hurting the most, right? Like, we don't know what's going on, and that oftentimes comes out in a way where that's the kid who doesn't have the love or the understanding or the compassion at home, and it trickles down. And I think that's ultimately where, like, everybody, just as a whole society moving forward, we all need to understand and take a better or more informed stance on how your behavior, whenever you think so or not, is affecting the people around you, especially once you become a parent, right?
Yeah, wow, that's really interesting because, like, on the I can imagine that there's definitely a lot of that going on where those kids that are acting as bullies, maybe something at home, and I'm completely generalizing here, but at the same time, like when things are too good at home, I feel like on the other end of the spectrum, it could lead to a vulnerability of interacting with those bullies, right? Like people might that things are so good at home that they've never seen that kind of conflict, so they won't even know how to handle it. So I feel like that could be extremely traumatizing for a lot of kids.
I was one of the points I was trying to make earlier, but I forgot about, and uh, Jackson nailed it. Is you don't know what the bullies are going through at home. Often these are the kids that are subject to physical abuse themselves from their parents, who are either heavy drinkers or any number of speculative reasons why they could be doing that to their children at home. But then that's the way they learn to interact with people. And I heard a story of George St. Pierre saying how he got into MMA, and what inspired him to be the person he is today is that he got bullied when he was a kid, and there was no good way to deal with it other than to stand up for himself. But there is a lot of reasons that contribute to why bullying permeates in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, well, I feel like there's probably some instances where everything is totally fine at home and there isn't any kind of reason except for maybe like a positive reinforcement, because I feel like being a bully, you're going to get this sort of like power kick. You're going to get this feedback of like, suddenly these kids around me are respecting me in a way that's different than I'm used to before I made this power play of being a bully. Like it's
And
interesting to think about.
I think that it's kind of intoxicating for them, like a drug. Like they don't get the respect at home when they're outweighed by twice their weight, and some giant man who should be loving and that they can trust is beating the ever loving crap out of them. Of course, that's how they're gonna learn to interact with others. And when they interact with others in that way and get the respect that they don't get at home, of course they're going to continue to exhibit that behavior. So it's on the parents more than anything to raise kids with respect for each other. And you're never going to cut out those deadbeat parents, but it's
Yeah.
a difficult situation to navigate. I don't know, as society, that we address that issue and make it not be an issue. I don't think there's a good way. I think as a community we just need to heavily promote and support as adults all the way down into the school system that bullying is not okay. And if you're experiencing troubles at home that make you want to bully, or you're being bullied, there's got to be more support, which I don't know that exists right now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that ultimately, with anything, I think the way that things change is we got to find a way. And I think it's happening with the impact of celebrities and that sort of pop culture media that's so easy to access with Instagram and Twitter, and you can see these kids getting on these social media networks. Where I remember when that was kind of coming up for me, the social media networks that we had, whether it was MySpace or the early days of Facebook or MSN or whatever. I'm not saying that online bullying doesn't exist anymore. It definitely exists, probably at a larger scale than what we experienced going through that. But the funny thing I always loop it back to is like jumping in like a Call of Duty lobby when you were like 14 years old. Like, dude, that was
Trash talk.
trash, dude. Like we battled with each other on there, and you didn't even know these people. They were strangers, but that was kind of what was cool, Like it was cool to get on the lobby and be like, "You suck, dude!" Like blah blah
Yeah,
blah blah blah, and go down this huge path. And I think
I've
the
done it.
only. Oh, sorry.
I've done it. I just wanted to
Yeah,
put that
Yeah, I've done it too.
and you know what, man? Like you have fun with it, and for me, when I was 14 and going through it, I didn't really ever see it as like someone could say whatever. They said a million lists of things. You're fat, stupid, ugly, all this stuff, and I was like, whatever. This guy doesn't even know me. It didn't affect me in the same way as I think personal, individualized attacks do, or in person being bullied. But I think the only way that it switches, and I think that even what I see is beginning to switch, is like acceptance and spreading love and having fun and caring and making other people happy and enjoy their lives is becoming cool, right? Like that's becoming something that I hope to see continue to expand. But like if we can as adults like influence that and realize and show kids like, hey, it's cool and way better to accept the new kid who just moved in from out of town, because then he gets to enjoy your school, enjoy your sports teams, enjoy whatever, rather than to bully that kid. Like, that to me is how change eventually will be initiated and carried through, is once we're able to make it quote unquote cool, you know?
Yeah.
It's true support and respect for others. And if you laud that and you reward people and you set that expectation that if you stand up for people and you accept them, we're going to give you support and we're going to give you praise because that is the right thing to do. Now, Jackson is the only one of us three that is actually a father. And I know me and Joe at some point in our lives are looking forward to the same thing. But then you look at most of the things that make me want to be a better adult is because I want to leave this world in a better place than it is for our kids and our grandkids. And it's very tough to say what is the most terrifying thing of potentially becoming a father, but I think probably number one is the fear of my kid getting bullied. So it's a very weird dichotomy where I understand what perpetuates it and there's not a good answer to it, but I feel very compelled to want to contribute to the solution because I'm terrified for my kids going through school and getting bullied.
Yeah, I mean, also, like, I was also kind of thinking about that there's potentially, but like kind of linking it back to what we were talking about how like we're animals, is there's this, I feel like there's definitely a status element too, whereas maybe there's like an alpha mentality, at least with males, probably like the first one to the top, like chimpanzees or gorillas or whatever other animal or monkey you want to think about. I think there's a status element too. So like, you know, the higher status you are, the more, again, the more respect, the more power, the more freedom in a really serious way you have. So I think that could be another like thing that definitely reinforces why people do it.
Yeah, and I think like touching on what Jake said, like I think it's crazy, man. The whole experience is mind blowing. Going through bringing another life into the world, and then realizing like, you know, the actual experience of birth and going through like the being a part of the pregnancy and all that is one element. Then once the thing's there, it completely shifts, because now it's like it's the responsibility. It's the biggest responsibility you'll probably ever have to do, but it's also the greatest thing and the most like rewarding experience you'll ever go through. And I mean, I could talk for days and days and days about how much I think my life has changed since we welcomed him to the world. But just touching on the one thing that you talked about regarding bullying and the fear of that, which I totally agree with. And I think ultimately once you see a mixture of your own something mixed with someone else you love to create a new human being, like it's mind blowing. But you get this overwhelming feeling of like, I don't want you to experience anything bad. All I want to do is give you good. I want you to be taken care of on every single element. I want you to never have to worry about anything or never have to deal with anything that I went through or will go through or anything like that. But then you also have the realization that like that's not life. Like, you're gonna go through bad things. You're gonna have heartbreak and disappointment and failure. And I think that like those things all create who we are. But just to touch on my ultimate point of all those things is like, I think the only responsibility that we can take and the only possible chance of avoiding that is to let them understand what it means for someone to bully. Like, someone is bullying another person because they're filling an empty space inside of themselves. Like, they don't know any better because they're hurting, or they're, so the kid who's out there and shoving kids in lockers, or telling a kid he looks stupid or dumb, it's because when he wakes up and looks at himself, he doesn't realize how special he is, or how important she is, or how much they can affect the world. And I think all we can really do, because you're going to fail, you're going to fall on your face, you're going to scrape your knee, but all we can really do is say, hey, when you see that, understand that there's a lot more to this than the person just saying, hey, you look stupid in those new shoes. Maybe that kid can't afford those shoes. Maybe his parents don't have the ability to help him dress the way you dress or look the way you look, or if they do, then there's something else that's most likely hiding from that. Because when people are shown love and they understand love and safety and compassion, you don't feel the need to put other people down. But when we enter into the world of trying to raise little people, I don't think you can explain that whole thing to them, but you can let them know, hey, the reason that this is happening is because of this. That means you have a chance to be a better person, to help that kid, or to try and just realize that, without taking it and understanding that, like, you're not the problem if you're being bullied. The person who's trying to bully you is the problem, but you can help by not letting that affect you in the fullest way that they want it to, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like everything you said there just resonated very well for me. And I think one of the biggest problems of this whole situation is the parents are not realistic. They want to protect their kid from everything negative. You can't set them up with a rosy picture of how the world is. I think you need to be honest with them, and it's hard to pinpoint at what point in their life. Is it 8? Is it 10? Is it 12? When do I explain to them the facts of life and what they might navigate through school? Now, I think being honest with them about situations like bullying and say, this might happen. Here's how you potentially can react to it. Here is probably your best route, but understand that if that happens, there's always variable A, B, and C that could happen. Now, one of my ways to protect my kids is going to be from an early age to get them into martial arts, because if you're confident in yourself and you know that you can defend yourself, you're more likely to stick up for others. And now, if you're more likely to stick up for others, I'm proud of you and the way that you're going to do that. But you also set yourself up for being that focus of gun violence or knife violence in a gang mentality. So you have to set your kid up with the basic principles to defend themselves and others, the mentality that it's right to do so, and we will support you unwaveringly if you do that in life, but also when to evaluate situations where the danger level is getting beyond your control and knowing who you are dealing with. If this person is so mentally unstable and they've shown a penchant for weapons violence, you might want to navigate that in a different way. And it also opens up the door for, if your kid is confident in himself and his ability to defend himself, he might be able to go to that bully without fear of being retaliated upon, and maybe get to the root of what's bothering them and why they bully people, and just have a offline discussion behind closed doors away from the crowd and say, look, I know you treat people in this certain way. There might be more to it. Do you want to talk about it? They might say no and go fuck yourself, but at least they know if it ever gets so bad at home, somebody has made that offer. And I think maybe that's one of the missing links.
Yeah, so many good points. Wow. You touched on a couple of things that I wanted to mention as well, being like, I don't know if bullying is going to be able to just be eliminated completely. I don't know. I don't think that is possible, but I think what might be important, at least for right now, who knows 2,000 years in the future where our society is going to be like, but at least for right now, I feel like I completely agree with the idea of learning how to react to it and how to handle it, because it's going to happen. And in a certain way, it totally toughens your skin for when you're an adult. But at the same time, it's like, if you don't do anything, then it eats you up inside. But if you perhaps, like, it makes me think of that one song, Billy, don't be a hero, where he's going off to war and his wife is just like, don't be the hero, please don't be the hero, come back to me. And he decides to be the hero, and then he dies, and then the song ends, where she's alone now. And it's a really sad song, super sad song. But there's that fine line, right? Well, I guess it's not a fine line; it's more of a gradient of being like mediating. How do you react to something like this? Because on the one hand, you could, have, like, I love the idea of enrolling in martial arts to at least be able to defend yourself, but at the same time, you don't know if they've got something on them or a weapon, kind of like how you mentioned, Jake, or if you don't know how to defend yourself, well, now you're just going to get your ass completely kicked and you're going to go home with a major trauma for 20 years probably, like psychologically speaking. But what I really wanted to kind of close this thought up with was, like, it's so important that we teach these things to each generation, and that might be why we have 100-year lifespans in the first place, is so that it just keeps being taught and taught and taught, over and over.
I think, when we thought of the idea of creating a podcast and we thought shooting the shit and going down the rabbit hole would be a good idea, it's these discussions that kind of make me proud of the fact that we did so, and diving into these complicated subjects with different viewpoints and opinions that could contribute to a solution. One of those proud moments. But when I think about, my fierce experience with bullying, I lived in BC up until the point I was in the end of grade 3, and we moved to Ontario for grade 4. And I went to the same elementary school as Joe did. And I remember, I don't even think it was a month into my grade 4, I got into an argument with somebody, and in BC, it would have been just verbal jabs back and forth, and nothing came from it. But there was verbal jabs. I did what I was used to and what I knew, and the quote unquote bully, I'm not going to name names, he clotheslined me off my chair. I fell back, hit my head off the concrete floor, got knocked out cold. We both got sent to the principal's office, and we laughed about it, and we became friends after. But that terrified me. It showed me the reality that life is not this insulated box I thought it was up until that point, and that, hey, you got to get with the program and either fit in socially as the new kid, or you got to learn to defend yourself and stand your ground. And I did a mix of both. I'm not sure I navigated the situation as well as I would have hoped in hindsight, but it's a terrifying reality for some kids who don't understand that can happen to them.
100%, man. And just a couple things to touch on that, running off what you just said there is, I played hockey my whole life. It was kind of what I was known as, what I took as whatever, and what I wanted my whole life, right? So I had an age in a place where I got my ability to actually play the game of hockey was good. It wasn't great. So I got to a place where I wanted to get to a certain level, and just playing and trying to, score goals and have fun and do what hockey is supposed to be at the younger levels wasn't quite enough. And I had to take a little bit of a different stance. And for me, that looked like being the guy who stood up and fought when we needed to fight, and getting to that level. So it's funny because I always understood confrontation. It was either involved in on one side or another, and not really in a physical sense, but with my brothers wrestling and this and that. And it was funny because I was talking to my older brother about this the other day. I was like, we'd be so heated and so mad and wrestling and fighting and hitting and this and that, but we never would punch each other in the face. Like, that was the most offside thing that would erupt into crying and parents involved in all this. So we pretty much did everything we could do to hurt each other without punching each other in the face. And I remember the first time I ever got in a hockey fight, I was 16 and I was at a camp in Red Deer, Alberta, and something happened. Well, actually what happened was before I went out and I had the skate, I was talking in the car with my dad, and we were just talking about the idea of you need to have a presence when you play hockey. You need to kind of have that don't fuck with me mentality that carries guys and adds that element of battle into the game, right? So he just said, a good rule of thumb is if you get in a confrontation on the ice, try not to back down. Don't be the first one to turn around and skate away, because if you do that once, then in the game of hockey, people will get your number and they'll know, okay, this guy will back down, and we can push him around a little bit, and they get more and more leeway. So fast forward to being on the ice, and something happens. We're in the front of the net. Me and this big defenseman get pushing back and forth, and I was wearing in hockey, you can, at the younger ages, you wear a full cage, and then once you go to juniors, you wear a half shield visor, a piece of plastic that just covers your eyes so you can see better. And I was wearing a cage, he was wearing a cage, and my whole life in these moments where you push and shove, everyone's seen it a million times. It all looks really big. There's a scrum, everything's going on, then the refs come in and break it up, and no fight happens, right? So that's what's happened my whole life. So I'm standing for the net, I push this kid, he pushes me back. I push him again. He pushes me back, and we're going back and forth. And I'm waiting for the refs to come in and separate us, so I don't have to go any further down this trail. And the referee comes in, and instead of separating us, he just looks at us both and he says, "If you guys are going to fight, you got to take your cages off." Meaning, we have to take our helmets off so that our heads are exposed and we can fist fight each other on the ice. And as he says this, I kind of look down and I'm like processing what he said. And by the time I look up, the kid I was pushing with is like skating backwards, taking his helmet off already with his gloves already on the ice. So like the fight's already started. And I'm like, holy shit. And I just remember a thought going through my head. And I was like, the one thing we weren't allowed to do growing up was punch each other in the face. And I'm like, I got to try and punch this guy in the face as hard as I can because he's going to try and do the exact same thing to me. And
Killed.
exactly. It was this understanding of confrontation. But then once the confrontation came, my whole life I thought I'd be scared and nervous and freak out and feel sick or whatever. And it was this and I ended up doing it quite a bit throughout the rest of my career. In the next 4 or 5 years, I had probably around 40 hockey fights. And each time it's this weird feeling where all of your senses get to such a heightened place that you almost go to like a quiet place. Like everything goes quiet, everything kind of dials itself down, but it's also the most intense moment, but it's in slow motion. And I just remember grabbing on and throwing my first punch and like watching my hand hit him in the face. And the whole time I thought I would have this feeling of like, oh my God, no, like this is what I'm supposed to do. And I never enjoyed it for 1 second. There was never a piece of me that was like, yeah, I just kicked that guy's ass. Like, fuck yeah, bro. Like I hated it. I hated every single second of it. But I also knew that in my mind, it was a way that I could potentially move forward in what I wanted to do. And that confrontation that I had from that moment on, I have never been in a bar fight. I've never been in a street fight. I've never been in a confrontation that could have been avoided. I've never engaged in it because I understand that the fighting on in the ice in hockey, it was always for a reason of standing up for somebody or doing something for my team or my teammates. But street fighting or fighting in the bar, I always understood the consequences. And I think that that's a huge thing that we don't do a good enough job of teaching young men as they go from being bullied or the bully as a child into young preteen, into teen, into adult. We don't do a good enough job of saying to them like, hey, that little moment of confrontation, unless it's literally fight or flight for your life, you can walk away. Like that's okay to walk away from something because the possibility of danger, the possibility of something becoming horrible and irreversible is such a fine line in confrontations. And I think that that's why doing martial arts or explaining to the kids what a real confrontation means and honestly what it means to get punched right in the nose and have your nose running and your eyes running and realize that that's a real feeling that doesn't feel good. That in itself can help down the road with people who are attracted to confrontations, you know?
Yeah.
I think, I had the same experience as you growing up. Like I would wrestle with my brother and, understand the value in standing your ground, but it never went into a point where there was a fist fight. And I remember when I got in my first fist fight, I remember the startling aspect of the first time I got punched in the face and the first time I punched somebody. So the first time I won a fight and the first time I lost a fight were good teaching moments because it taught me that in a street fight, and George St. Pierre talked about this on the podcast with Joe Rogan recently, is that usually the person to win a street fight is the person who swung first. So it's very important to get the punishment in before you take it back. And I hate to liken it back to, kill or be killed, but it just goes to show you that the mentality of these young men is that at some point in my life, I'm going to encounter physical harm and I'm going to be ready or I'm not going to be ready for it. How do I react to it? And I think as a parent of a future child growing up, I would say it's okay to defend yourself and, do it to the fullest extent that you need to get out of that situation. But don't use your ability to harm others as a tool for intimidation.
Yeah, it's better to have that skill than to not have it at all. And I think that's why it's so damn important that, we wrestle with, with our fathers or our older brothers or with our uncles or cousins or whatever. Because me and you, Jake, dude, I would be way younger and you guys would let me jump on top of you and start
Flying squirrel.
Yeah, that was my nickname, the flying squirrel. And it's interesting that kind of like what you were saying too, Jax, how for that whole time when you guys were wrestling, you couldn't punch each other in the face, but then suddenly when you were faced with that on the rink, you had that option open to you. And at the very least, that wrestling comes down to, at least training, giving a little bit of that martial arts, because like animals do it too, like lions and like lion cubs and that sort of stuff. They wrestle and play. That's part of the point of play. It's like training for when shit actually goes down.
Yeah.
Well, I think throughout my life, I've fortunately been blessed with the ability to give it more than I can take it, but I can also take a punch. And I've had a ass whooping handed to me. Like I got into a conflict in the street outside of a drug house where it was a 3-on-1 fight, and I got my ass handed to me. And that was the first time I remember thinking, I never want to be in this position again. How do I avoid it? Not really a good way to navigate that and an easy answer. But I think if anybody listens to this podcast that knew me from growing up, they might have differing opinions on who they thought I was, which perception is a lot of people's views of you. So if majority perception is that you're an asshole and you started fights, that is what it is. But I would like to think that I did mostly defending myself when I needed to, and I didn't start a lot of fights. But part of the reason I moved out of Kingston is because something about the attitude in that city just seemed to perpetuate people challenging me. And I didn't want to constantly be in this feedback loop of wanting to fight others to prove my manhood. Now I got out, I had a fresh start, and I haven't had a street fight in 5 years. But in the 10 years that I lived in Kingston, I've probably been in 40 street fights and got my ass handed to me a good 5-10 times and laid a goddamn beating on people at least 10-15 times, and it doesn't feel good. But that's the mentality of certain social groups or certain cities that kind of perpetuate this attitude of we want to be in the presence of the tough person, or we want to be the tough person ourselves, because we never want to be the prey. It's a tough.
Exactly. I think that kind of goes back in, wrapping it full circle, is the biggest thing that you can help your kids, I think, hopefully in the future, and teach them as they get older. And I didn't think I really fully understood when I was a kid, but you got to surround yourself with people that make you feel comfortable, that make you feel safe, because it ultimately, that's all we can do, is either we surround ourselves with good people, we surround ourselves with bad people. And that, to me, I mean, going even with a bigger loop back, which is so exciting, is like why the internet and games is such a cool thing and a cool community, because you can find your safe place online with a group of people playing the same video game, or whatever online, that maybe you don't have that. Maybe you live in a bad neighborhood. Maybe you live in a city that you can't avoid street fights. You can't avoid running into the wrong crowd, but you can jump online and find your community of people that you can spend that time with, and understand that you don't need to buy into the negativity around you.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to leave
so
that for now.
We are going to unfortunately wrap it up. There's going to be untold amounts of discussion probably on similar topics as we've discussed today, but also, something to look forward to going forward. If you were into this discussion, it won't be the last time we kind of touch on a lot of the elements that contribute to this situation we talked about. But for right now, we got something for you.
It's time for lightning round. It's time for lightning round.
All right, so the third inaugural edition, and this will probably be a part of almost everyone if we can fit it in on time. We had our winner of last podcast, Joe, who is going to be the host with the most, dropping either trivia or true or false on us. You queued up over there? You ready to go?
Yeah, I think I got something here for sure.
Okay, so it'll be 11 questions, just to give it enough depth, but keep it brief. And may the best man win. Jax, you're going down, bud.
Ooh, okay. Are we ready? We're going true and false for today.
Let's go.
Because I was going to do a few different varieties, but let's just do a quick true or false question quiz. The question number 1: the Channel Tunnel is the longest rail tunnel in the world. True or false?
Real time.
I'm gonna say I don't even know what the hell the channel tunnel is, but I'm gonna say false.
It's the channel. I think it runs through England, but as I understood, it's a waterway. So I'm going to say false.
Both are correct. Well done. The Gotthard-based tunnel in Switzerland is 4 miles longer at 35.5 miles long.
Yeah, boy.
Okay, question number 2. An emu can fly.
Oh, false.
False.
That is true.
What?
Oh.
Emos can fly. So no points for either of you guys.
Here's
there.
why we asked them, eh?
Yeah, aren't they big ass ostriches kind of looking things?
Basically, yeah. But I guess they can fly for a split second and then immediately land.
It's one of those glide hoverings. Could you imagine one of those things like an ostrich sky like diving bombing you? Like how intimidating that would be?
That would be. I have nightmares about that later. Question 3: the can opener was not invented until 45 years after the tin can.
That's a hilarious thought. Jake, you want to go first?
I'm going to say true.
Yeah, I'm feeling true for that too.
It is true. It is true. All right, 2 for each.
Which like, dude, what? Like, think about that for a second. Like when your can opener breaks when you're trying to open something, you're just like, oh well, now I don't get to enjoy what's inside this can. But for 45 years, they had to figure that shit out.
45 years.
Trusty pocket knife, man.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Vietnamese is an official language in Canada.
Jax, you want to take this one?
True.
Jake?
I think Canada has like a shit ton of official languages, don't they?
It's possible.
Okay, Jake, what do you think?
I'm going to say false.
Joe?
The answer is
What did
false.
Jackson say?
He said true.
I said true. I thought that recently Canada has like opened up to like a bunch of official languages as like part of our diversity policy, but I guess I'm wrong.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Supported, but not official.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, next question. Humans are the only animals that bury their head.
That bury their head?
Yeah.
They breathe with their head or bury their head?
Bury.
What the fuck does that even mean?
I'll read it again. Humans are the only animals that bury their head.
I'm gonna say false.
Yeah, false. I don't know what that means. I'm gonna say false.
Yeah, it was a tough question. It's false.
Do it.
It doesn't even have a follow up. It just says false. It doesn't even say like.
Is it like BURY?
Yeah, bury.
You can cut. You evaluate the question as you read it, and you say, "I'm going to cut that horse shit."
Yeah, maybe not that one.
That's funny. Though.
All right, next question. There are McDonald's. There are one McDonald's on every continent except one.
False.
True.
It is true.
Antarctica.
Yeah. All right, so the score is currently Jake 4, Jax 2. We're gonna move on.
What are we? We're going to 5.
Well, because when we both answered the same thing, are you giving us both a point or nobody a point?
I'll give you both points. So yeah, we'll make it 5-3.
Well, what are we playing to?
Well, it's 11 questions.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I didn't know how many questions it was.
What are we on? Like 8? No, we're on 9.
We're on 9. So Jack's going to have to get every single one of these right. Question 4. That's wrong. Cher's full name is Sherilyn Sarkeesian.
False.
True.
It is true.
Jesus.
We'll do a couple more questions just for the fun of it.
All right.
Edinburgh is furthest east, or Edinburgh is further east than Carlisle.
In Scotland?
I think so.
I'm gonna say true.
It is false.
Yeah, okay.
With a landslide.
Complete guess.
Yeah.
Complete guess. But I'm excited to listen to
Jake's Rant.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we got one more question.
Oh,
Isn't
sorry.
it question 11?
All right, let's do it. Let's do one more. Last one for fun. Nicolas Cage and Michael Jackson were married to the same woman.
Oh, true.
True, yeah. Wait. We should, if it's true, we have to guess who it is.
It was Lisa Marie.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say too. Okay, never mind.
Was it?
It's true. Yeah, the page that I'm looking at these, I'm going to try and find a better one for next time because it just says answers, but it doesn't follow up with like good answers. It's just true or false.
That's all right.
All right.
All right. Woo, yeah.
Here we go.
All right. Well, that was fantastic, and I'm loving this segment more and more now that I get to participate too. But we also have...
What's weird in the world today? What's weird in the world today?
Woo! What's weird in the world today? What's world in the weird today? Either one of them. I'd like to open the floor to you guys first to see how you set the tone, but I got something juicy for you. So,
all right, I'll take us away here down a little path. And you know what? I almost feel like I'm milking the cow dry on this one because it's like the least. This might be the least shocking what's weird in the world today news of all time. Going back to the bank, we're going to go to the wonderful, our favorite world leader, Donald Trump. So the guy, I honestly feel like the one thing that makes me sad about Donald Trump being our president today is, I mean, maybe we'll get there, but in 25 or 30 years, we're going to have to watch an amazing documentary about the time this guy was actually elected as the president of the United States and ruled for 4, potentially 8 years with the election coming up. We're not going to go all the way down the politics rabbit hole and go another 16 hours on this podcast discussing our opinions and views. But I will say an article I seen today on the New York Times, Donald Trump refusing to wear a safety mask in public. It is the least shocking thing, but at the same time, it's somehow the most shocking thing because this guy is straight up just being like, everybody, we're good. And like the worst part about it is,
I do.
Is he not like one of the more vulnerable type of people to this virus? Like,
Yeah,
the guy's almost 80 years old. He cannot live in good health. Like, it's mind blowing to me. It's one thing to be like, yeah, I don't believe in COVID, but then to be just walking around as the president being like, I refuse to wear the mask. This is just going to be another powder keg that continues to explode, and we will continue to see videos of people coughing on each other and spitting on each other in the wonderful, wonderful country of the United States of America.
Face masks are fake news, bud.
They are fake news, so I've been told. And that is my what's weird in the world. We're going to pass it off.
What's weird in the world today, buddy?
As if we didn't already have enough to worry about with giant murder hornets invading the U.S. and a global pandemic and almost World War III, millions of 17-year cicadas will emerge from the ground this year. So they're basically just bugs that are going to swarm all over the place. So it just feels like 2020, like what's weird in the world in 2020, I feel like is going to be a hashtag for future installments as the years pass on. Because like so many weird things are going on in the world today that, again, we're in a different dimension. 2012. That's real.
Wait a second. 1 second. Are you saying that bugs that have been hiding in the ground for 17 years are going to just emerge randomly?
Yes. They're large. They're large. Millions. Large. They're large, clear-winged insects that occur either annually or periodically. So apparently, they're on a 17-year period, and they're just gonna.
Sounds like the end of days.
Don't like that. Just gonna go ahead and put
I'm
myself
gonna,
under the do not fuck with that category.
I'm gonna need to see your source on this one.
CTV News.
CTV, okay, that's pretty legit.
Fake news.
Oh, fake news. Okay, so what's weird in the world today? Well, here I got a link for you guys. We'll put it in the comments for the archive podcast on our website if you guys want to go check it out as you're listening. I beg you two to go to that link right now so you can kind of see what I'm talking about as we discuss it. So a lot of people seem to think that animals are just this, cuddly creature that doesn't have too much critical thought or ability to like kind of problem solve or navigate situations as they come. But this is an oldie but a goodie. I see it every once in a while, and it's a picture of an orangutan on the river catching a fish by using a spear. So that shows that these orangutans are smart
We're
enough
fucked, dude.
where they're using tools, and they're kind of imitating the evolution that probably took place, God knows how many years ago to lead to us. Now, whether you're an evolutionary theorist or you're a creationist, let's put that aside for now and just look at this picture of a goddamn orangutan using a spear to catch fish. Not only is that impressive and equally weird, but it makes me more passionate for not only orangutans, but like animals in general, because I think they're smarter than we think they are. I think they feel more than we think they do. And that's an awesome level of ingenuity. And I keep hearkening back to videos I see of bulldozers going through the forest to plant their palm trees for human consumption, and they're destroying the natural habitats of these wonderful creatures that are smart enough where they can use goddamn tools. Have you ever seen an orangutan trying to fight a bulldozer while the fucking forest around him is on fire and he just looks sad? That nothing hurts my heart in life more than that, and maybe a couple other things, but that hurts.
Yeah.
That's definitely weird to see him holding a spear.
Also real quick, that's as many as 1.5 million cicadas per acre. So they're harmless though to humans, but they're loud and noisy and
I still don't like that. But going back to this orangutan, dude, people suck, man. Like we should not be the ones deciding this shit that we decide. Like, dude, yeah, this is crazy. I don't know. I want us to just be better. If you're listening to this, be nicer and be better, and don't if you like if
Don't use palm products.
Yeah, eat what you want to eat and do what you want to do, but like just think about people other than yourself. Like you're important. We love you. Keep listening and talk to us and come and share your thoughts and stuff. And you are awesome in your own individual human, but there's more people out there and animals matter too. So just try if you can. And we appreciate that.
Preach.
Yeah, that's it.
I use those products all the time. It's probably socially an obligation we should probably fulfill by reading ingredients better.
Yeah,
another story for another day, but
I think real quick, it just reminds me of a scary movie when he shows a picture and he's just like, look what they do to these poor animals, and there's just like lipstick all over their face. It's kind of funny, but it's mean.
So a lot of the discussion today was kind of very opinionated. So when we're going over to fact check, there isn't anything that I caught. So we're going to move right on into our other favorite segment.
Time for your favorite segment, Epic Rants.
Yeah, so we got the third time Epic Rants is going down. Jackson set the tone really well in week one. Joe is excited for week two. I think we'll see more going forward. My epic rant for the day is not going to take a turn for the negative. I'm going to try and keep it positive here. So I just want to give you an indication of something that has helped me be successful in life. And I just want to be an advocate for these things. And the things I'm talking about are lists. So lists and follow-up action upon those lists are key to being successful in life. I know the most organized, the most committed, the most motivated I've ever been in life to tackle a new project or to tackle a new schedule or to get over a bad habit is to list out what I want or list out what I have to do or list out my feelings. And just the act of writing reinforces. And I know a lot of people, like my fiance, kind of, she's tired of the listing. She knows I'm big on it. She knows I preach it. She doesn't want to hear it. It doesn't work for everybody, but I can honestly tell you that nothing has been more effective for me as far as productivity goes in my life. And I want to kind of throw that to the people that feel like they're treading water or that they can't gain any traction towards their goals or that they're unmotivated. Write down exactly what you want and how you feel and how you want to feel and what you don't want to do anymore. Write out your goals, plan things, and act on them. That's my epic rant for today.
Nice.
I love it.
So on that note, we will be back again very shortly for episode 4. Look forward to more content out of the future. If you want to look at old podcast episodes or you want to read our blog, you can either check us out on iTunes for the blog episode or the podcast episodes, or you can go directly to the website www.seewhatsticks.net. You can find us on Facebook at See What Sticks, a variety podcast, Instagram at the See What Sticks podcast, Twitter at See What Sticks 01, or the See What Sticks, a variety podcast on YouTube. So speaking for myself, Jackson, and Joe, we guys hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we can't wait to see you again next time.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Peace.